So we are back for another episode of the Her Trails podcast. I'm sitting in the couch or on the couch with Liz Duncan, and we're both kind of awkward, jacket rustling, fidgety humans, right?
Yeah, shout out to Kathmandu. It's like keeping us warm.
Keeping us warm through the Melbourne winter. I'm super excited to have you here because we met maybe like 8 months ago. At a run experience where there was running and yoga and kind of social connection, and I got to know you a little bit, but I think it's been post that time through the voyeuristic nature of social media and now getting to do a couple of things with you through Her Trails that I'm actually really excited to unpack your story of really what it looks like to be at your top of your game, the highs, the lows, the challenges to one's identity and how you kind of experience failure, you capture it, you grow, and yeah, I guess the whole gamut in between.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I'm excited to be here.
Can you give me a definition of kind of how you consider yourself professionally and personally?
So I guess I am a teacher, so I do a little bit of teaching, just relief at the moment. Because I'm working with Alice on For Runners, Pilates for Runners platform. So that's predominantly what we're doing. But yes, I'm also a professional runner, so I see that as, something that I'm doing a majority with my life. I travel overseas and compete, and I have been I think I've represented Australia about 11 times, and so I've been lucky enough to skip most of the Melbourne summers over the past sort of 10 years because, chasing the summer being athletics, we're in Australia for the domestic season here, and then after that we sort of head to the US or head to Europe to continue chasing the summer and track races over there.
And you're essentially kind of doing that again this year, right?
Yeah. On a slightly different, in a slightly different way, I guess, because unfortunately I've had a hamstring injury, and so that kept me out for about 3.5 months. And so the last, 2 months I've been building back slowly from that. And it has been a really slow, tedious process. Plenty of physio, strength, Pilates, PRP injections, all kinds of things. Fortunately, I'm back on track now. Not quite ready to be competing, at a high level on the track, but we're still going to be heading over to the US, jumping in some races and taking our new Pilates app over there too.
That's crazy because when we started talking before we got on the podcast, I said to you do you consider yourself like an elite athlete? And you're like, oh, well, I'm in rehab right now. And my gut reaction is like, yeah, that means you're totally an elite athlete because I see elite athletes, and you can totally debunk, correct this, but I think, when you are vying to be at the top of your field, within Australia, globally, there is a massive process of adaptation, breakdown in order to be the best. And so I see rehab as a part of the elite athlete journey. But a lot of elite athletes that I talk to, almost with a bit of shame, when they're in rehab, it feels like they're questioning their identity as an elite athlete.
Yeah, that's absolutely relatable. And I think it is a really hard thing because, it's obviously easy to identify as that when, you're winning national championships and you're on the podium in international races. That's obviously easy, but that's not always the case. And I think being an elite runner, it's a roller coaster. There's, high highs and low lows, and that's just the nature of sport, I guess, in general. And so then, as soon as you get an injury and you're out for a little bit, particularly if people are following your journey on social media, a lot of people just assume that, you're 33 years old, so you probably just quit, or you're probably not doing it anymore, or, doing something else with your life. And so it is sort of hard to sort of justify. And I'm like, well, my intentions are that I'm going to be back on the track by next summer and, vying for a spot on the Australian team for the Paris Olympics. But I guess sometimes you kind of want to keep that to yourself and keep it on the down low because, yes, that's my goal, but I don't want to publicize it too much and guess you fail, I guess.
How do you focus on silencing the external voice in the process of you holding tight to what is your goal?
Yeah, I think it can be really hard when you've got social media and people are sort of everyone has their own opinion. To be honest, I feel like I've been really fortunate. No one's criticizing, and it's always the pressure that you put on yourself is so much more than any pressure that anyone puts on to you. And I got a message from someone recently. Like, I put up an old photo of one of us on the podium. And
saw it.
Yeah, and I got some on the podium. So my team won a bronze medal at the World Relay Championships a few years ago. And, you know, I guess someone that's new to following me had no idea that I'd been doing that. And so it's quite nice that no one expects anything of you other than, you know, to do your best and share your journey. But it's more often than not the pressure that we put on ourselves that creates the stress.
And often we place pressure on ourselves based on our perception of what is the expectation of other people. It's not actually the genuine expectation of other people, it's our perception of it, which links me to think about, there's this book that I really love. It's called The 5 Common Regrets of the Dying. It's written by Australian author Bronnie Ware, a wonderful human who I've been really lucky to meet through being on the corporate speaker circuit. And she was a palliative care nurse doing, you know, what is some of the most important work that you can do, helping people transition into the ultimate unknown. And she said that the number one common regret shared to her by her dying patients was, I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself and not the life that others expected of me. Not the life that others expected of me. You know, like how much weight we place on based on what we think other people are thinking. And the reality is, people don't actually really care, not for any like enduring, you know, momentum. Like they might have a comment, they might have a moment of outrage, but they don't stick with it. They move on to the other aspects of their own personal journey, which is fraught with their own complications.
Yeah. Oh, I think everyone can absolutely relate to that, like no matter what phase of life you're in.
Yep.
And I know I did primary school teaching as my university degree, and so I've always just got this kind of nagging obligation to be, you know, teaching full time. It's not really what I want to do. It's not what makes me happy, and I don't think it's necessarily my strength. I think my strength is in coaching and sort of motivating others, and especially within and helping people through Pilates and just becoming their best self through the coaching as well. And so that's my passion, and that's where I like to help people. But then I do always feel like, oh, I should be in the classroom because that's what my HEC stat is saying I should do.
Even if you could make more money doing something that's not teaching to pay off that HEC stat.
Yeah. But no, I think you're absolutely spot on. And I think it's really important to be doing, you know, what you want, because that's going to make you the best person. And then you're in turn going to be able to, that's going to rub off on the people around you.
Can we talk about Rio?
Yeah. I'm at the point now I can talk about it.
I'm like itching to like, do we talk about it? No, I think, the way let's just take a step back. How about you talk about it and then we'll go from there?
Yeah, well, I guess 2016 started off as probably like my best year of running. So I competed, I was selected to represent Australia in the World Indoor Championships. So I went over to the US for that and made the final, came 6th, broke the Australian record. Everything was going pretty well, so I was pre-selected for the Rio Olympics, and you know, literally running the best of my life, best form of my life. And then I landed awkwardly while I was just on a training run. Broke one of my metatarsals, but it wasn't identified correctly, like initially, because it wasn't in, I think the doctors look for stress fracture areas, but mine was quite up high in the bone, so it's kind of like a dancer's injury. You know, dancers that go on point.
Yeah.
I'm a really toe-y runner, so I think that having a lot of pressure, you know, when I'm on my toes, sort of contributed to a weakness, and then just that snap when I landed awkwardly just made it go completely. So I guess, like, cut a long story short, I had to withdraw from the Olympic team just sort of a week or two out from it. And, that was obviously, you know, not the most ideal thing. I then had to have surgery, and I couldn't walk on it for 4 months because I had, like, plates and screws into it to make it heal correctly. But, yeah, that was probably, you know, the first really tricky time for me, because that was my identity. That's what I was doing, and that's what I had been, you know, that was my life goal, my purpose, and everything that I was doing for my life was surrounded by that. And then I guess, you know, it is winter. It's the middle of the year when the Olympics are supposed to be on, I think July, August. You know, all your training partners are overseas chasing the summer, as you do, go to Europe, compete in all the races in preparation for the Olympics, and you're kind of just left in Australia by yourself with kind of nothing really to do and no one to sort of, you know, the people that you hang out with like on an everyday basis because you're training together, they're kind of gone, and they're still doing their thing, which is totally like expected, but you are kind of just left in this like really big hole. And I think for me that was probably the first time that I kind of experienced that, I guess, one of the lows of the roller coaster that is running.
Are you, when something like that happens and you're literally on the precipice of competing at the highest, level, what support is given to you in that process?
Yeah, I think, I feel really fortunate. I've got a fantastic family. They were there, like, for me regardless. You can't really expect anyone else to sort of be there because, your family always have your back. Your training partners, they're doing their thing. I saw a psychologist. I was in the Victorian Institute of Sport and they were great in sort of pushing me to see a psychologist. Wasn't really for me because I was like, well, I'm really sad about this situation, but like I have a reason to be, there's nothing wrong. There is something wrong, but it's kind of expected to be sad. Like it's not like I needed help to sort of get through it. It was just, I just had to kind of get on with my life as much as possible. And so then that's when I first started coaching as well. So that was really great because it was a way that I could kind of keep in the sport, keep involved, and be contributing even though I couldn't do it myself.
Yeah, I mean, I think, everyone can relate to, like running for the everyday person is something that gives people freedom, a means for perspective. And when you're not able to do that because you're injured, it can be soul-crushing even to the everyday runner. Now, couple that with someone who's doing it literally for their profession and it's tied so closely to their identity, like I can imagine the process from moving through disappointment, maybe even anxiety and kind of getting onto the other side of it, it must take time, right?
Yeah, and I mean, and that's the thing, like it just does take time. You just have to sort of be patient. There's not like a way, no one can come up to you and say, oh, everything's going to be fine, because it's not, because, then you sort of now kicked out of that Olympic alumni. So, whenever they have the celebratory lunches, you're kind of uninvited to that because you're kind of no longer an Olympian. And so that's always going to be a thing, you can't get the Olympic tattoo because you didn't do the race. And so, there's all those kinds of feelings. And what I found at the time that I was pushed into is to do a lot of motivational speaking. And so I would go around to schools and like different workplaces and just sort of encourage kids to have a go because and try new things. Because I mean, when I was it did make me kind of reconsider everything and just be grateful for the opportunities that I had until that point. And I mean, as a 13, 14-year-old, when I first started getting involved in running, I was not a good runner. I hated running. My older sister, Katie, has always just been a really good runner, basically good at everything she does. She's one of those person that's like school captain, Cinderella in School Musical. And so I just copied her and did everything that she did, including going for these runs. And I was like, I don't even want to be here. And I remember stopping and like hiding behind trees and taking shortcuts because I was like, I don't even like this. But I got sucked in. I went to a local athletics club and I was absolutely sucked in by the social aspect of it. Meeting people from other schools, other ages. It was absolutely fantastic. And so from that, I grew consistency with my running. And so that was a message. And so that was probably, I was about 13 or 14 years old. And then by the age of 17, I made my first Australian team at the World Juniors. And so that became a message that I would then sort of spread to teenagers that like, you don't have to be one of these kids that are just naturally talented, just, consistency, enjoyment, and, you never know what you're going to end up. You've got to try new things. And so I guess that sort of became my purpose from there, was kind of like sharing the message of, trying to get people involved in sport and trying new things.
Well, what's your personal advice through experience if someone's got an injury and it stops them in their tracks from doing a race or training? What's some of the strategies that you've used to keep yourself afloat?
Yeah, I think that whenever you're injured, you are often fixated on, what you can't do because, you're used to your norm, your everyday, what you can do. And then all of a sudden that's taken away from you. And so I reckon the best thing to do is just sort of take a step back and just go, all right, well, what can I do? Yeah. Maybe it's dancing, maybe it's surfing, maybe it's something completely different. Maybe rollerblading is actually okay. I think sometimes it doesn't necessarily have to be active, maybe sewing. There's lots of different things that you can actually do to sort of, I guess, fulfill that satisfaction and sort of trying new things as well. I think that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, I like that. One, try new things, but also I think it's not just – I think we get fixated on these things when it's more about like how do these things make us feel, and can something else replace that thing to also make us feel that same type of thing, or maybe feel even better.
Yeah.
So like thinking about like, okay, well this thing gives me endorphins, it makes me feel happy, it makes me feel light. When I've had a couple of injuries, I've actually, and even when I was pregnant with Harry and I couldn't run, I mean I couldn't even walk up a flight of stairs, so movement wasn't really my thing then. And I realised like what I just need is like to be able to be in outdoor beautiful spaces. I still need to be able to see, you know, a sunrise, and it doesn't have to be linked into going for a vision of the sunrise and then go for a run. Like just simply standing and watching the sunrise gives me enough.
Taking some colouring in materials or something like that.
Just like
taking a guitar, like, yeah, there's plenty of things
have
you
moments,
can do.
make a picnic, you know, like it's just, and I think, you know, we can so quickly go to the woe, all is lost moment when really like there is an opportunity for reprieve, pause, and to redirect ourselves into another modality, physical or otherwise, that also gives us that great feeling we're looking for.
Yeah, and to be totally honest, I don't think through that injury I really like achieved that. I don't think I really kind of nailed what, you know, finding my purpose or, you know, finding something that really replaced it. Like it was quite a sad time, and it was like pretty hard, and, you know, there's lots of things that you can do to try and sort of forget about it, but it's always there, and it's always going to be, you know, feeling that knot in your stomach whenever you realise, and you sort of think, well, could I have done something differently, or I don't know, maybe I could have had more yogurt to sort of supplement my bones or something like that. You're just, it's always going to be there, and it's probably not until this most recent injury that I have had, that I'm just coming back from now, that I have really got hard into Pilates. And what I found from that is that I actually just feel strong. And so even though I had to take 3.5 months off running, I actually feel really good. And I've got back into running like pretty quickly, but it like through like just body strength and mobility, that's something that I've actually found, you know, that's something that I could do the whole time through the injury. And that's something that I sort of kind of feel like it's actually contributing to making me better, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and also I think on top of it, you've also endured this setback before, and so you are mentally more prepared that it sucks, but you can get through it, and there is like light at the end of the tunnel, whether it's still pursuing running or being able to pursue other things, and you have multiple things that you know spend your time doing now too.
Yeah, exactly, and that's absolutely true. Like, you know, when you get selected for your first Olympics, that's literally everything that's going on in your world, whereas I guess like moving forward, you sort of, and through that you gain that perspective that there are so many other things to be done as well, you know, so many people to appreciate, and lots of other things in your life.
Is the discipline that's your focus, you've gone from the 1,500 metres to the 5K, is like the 5K your area now?
Yeah, I think so. I'm still yet to master it, I reckon. I've had a couple of really good races, but yes, you have. Can you please just tell us how good have some of your races been? So my goal is to break 15 minutes for 5K. Right. I was very close to it, but then I ended up moving to Japan for a couple of years to run for a corporate team. And so the training that we had to do over there was like actually ridiculous. So we're running 3 times a day. So for example, like the morning session might be a 10 to 14K run along the river, about 4 minutes per K. And every single kilometre was like ticked off, and you had to be right on 4 minutes per K, because we had the coaches on bikes with us. We had to run single file, no talking, up and back. And so that was a 6 a.m. session, and then 11 o'clock would be like a 12K tempo on the track. So literally, and I guess the way that it works, you come home, have a shower, they have a bath like every single morning, and then you walk over to breakfast. We had a chef that prepared our breakfast. So you'd go over there, eat your breakfast, which is like, you know, lots of little bits and pieces. So it's like, it takes like half an hour to eat. And then we do the washing up all together, go back to your house, and then kind of just like rest for like 40 minutes or something. And then you literally have the 11 o'clock session straight up after that, which could be like a track session of, often it'll be like a 12K tempo run on the track. So like 30 laps or 10 like 400 meter reps or something like that. And then you basically do the same thing, have a shower, have a bath, go to lunch, clean up, go back, and then have a little rest. And then you have your afternoon session at about 4 o'clock, which would often just be like an easy jog or something. So I'd start like jogging, and then it would very quickly break into a walk, because I'm not a 3 a 3 runs per day kind of athlete.
I mean, were you doing strength then? Were you doing Pilates?
I wasn't doing it at all over there. And I guess that's when my hamstring injury started, when I was over there, because I don't know, they don't prioritize strength over there. They're very much marathon focused, and so they just think you want to run as much as possible. Yeah, so it's different.
Things have changed, right? I mean, and thank goodness, because it allows us to be so much more rounded. And I think particularly for women, you don't just want to be, even if you're at the top of your sport, you don't just want to be great now. You want to think of like the version of you when you're 60 and 70 and think that you haven't destroyed your body, and like a holistic approach to training that incorporates, strength, mobility, Pilates.
Absolutely.
Is what does it.
Yeah, and it is interesting. I think like we're really good with it here, but over there they just we did have a team gym, but no one really used it, and I would try and use it, and they didn't really encourage it, which is fine. It's just different, and I think that maybe the way that they're built, they just don't need it as much as we do. But yeah, that was certainly the beginning of this hamstring injury. So I wish that I had Pilates back then, and like proper like strength program, because I think it would have contributed. I think it would have helped prevent this injury anyway.
Yeah, well, you're going into what is a new chapter, which we will get to talk about later on. But I do think that being a collector of challenging times and knowing that you can not only get through it, but utilise that moment down into the track to keep your resolve and to realise that you're really tough is quite powerful. And I think you've had a good selection of adversities in your professional life that are actually going to serve you into whatever you choose to do next.
Yeah, and I think it's also about like being able to take a step back and sort of see the bigger picture. And it sounds really cliche, I know, but it is, like sometimes you need to like speak to somebody. I actually think it's really important to have a coach, and I work really closely with my coach and literally just do everything that he says, which is sometimes hard because I'm quite stubborn and opinionated. But even like coming back from this injury, like 5K is the event that I want to be doing. But it's like, okay, well, running fast is not going to be great for my hamstring. So we're going to pull back. This whole year is going to be base training. I'm going to jump in a couple of half marathons, and then by next summer I'll get back on the track and give it a really good crack then. And so I think that, most important thing is focus on what you can do and think of the bigger picture and work out how you can get back to what you want to be doing in the most patient way. And I think patience is literally the hardest thing to have, but it's what you need.
Well, and you do. And I think we often put arbitrary goals on ourselves, and I understand you've got some threshold like timings because you want to try and get to Paris.
Yeah.
But I think for most people who are not doing it professionally, yes, you might have a half marathon booked 6 months down the track, but we are so lucky that there are so many half marathon events around Australia, and really they're around the world all the time. So if to push yourself to reach a goal that is not the right goal for you based on what is happening to you in this particular moment, not all is lost. You've gotten a lot to get to that point. You can shift the goalpost and look after yourself more sustainably. And I love that you're thinking the long game with this.
Yeah. And I mean, that's exactly my recommendation to the athletes that I coach as well. Often some people will come to me and they say, all right, I haven't done any running at all before, but I really want to run a half marathon, or I really want to run a marathon. And I just sort of think, okay, well, let's not actually set an end goal. I actually prefer to start with weekly routines and daily habits to make sure that, you're doing your pre-run activation, you're getting your runs in. And, once you've got months and months of uninterrupted training, just sort of back-to-back runs, then you can start thinking about, okay, I want to do a half marathon. There's one in a month's time. And if you've got a really good base of training behind you, all you need is a month to sort of just increase your longer runs a little bit, tweak a few things, and then you're good to go.
I love it. Just totally lost my voice. That's awesome advice. I loved having you on here. I appreciate you sharing what I know has been really difficult and probably still difficult in different ways, but there are so many nuggets, hopefully for yourself, but also for everyone listening. So I appreciate you.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me.